And got my APO and cycle, no mama bad like Michael. Can't really trust nobody. Throw this jewelry on you, my roof look like a no-show. Diamonds by the boatload, and with the Tony Romo for clouds and all the bozos. APO and cycle, no mama bad like Michael. Can't really trust nobody. Throw this jewelry on you, my roof look like a no-show. Diamonds by the boatload, don't act like you're my friend when I'm rolling through my end zone. She's stuck in the friend zone. I'm like 4, 5 to fit, ayy.
What is up, guys? My name is Luke Nagel. I produce for Lyra Productions in Nashville, Tennessee. This is our first video where we're going to explain a mix technique. Specifically for this one, we're going to be looking at Post Malone and that vocal style of sort of a little bit auto-tune, but also a good performance, and trying to highlight that. And so we're going to basically try to replicate a vocal chain that you might hear in a Post Malone style song, especially his 2018 stuff, but we're only going to use Logic plugins. So if you just have Logic, you don't need to get any other plugins from any other external sources to make this work and to build this chain. So first of all, we got the instrumental for the song Psycho. I downloaded it from a YouTube channel. I'll leave their link in the description. And then I recorded a vocal. So it's already comped. So that's definitely the first step of anything you're going to do. So you're going to comp the vocal, take the best parts of it. But so my vocal's already comped, so that way we can just easily dissect it and look at all of the elements that went into making this work and making it really pop and bright and just sound exactly like you'd want that vocal to sound. So let's start out here by taking off all of our bus sends and plugins, and we're just going to explain each step of the chain one by one, why they're in that order and why they're there to begin with. So the first thing that I would put on any vocal chain, if you're going to have it, would be a pitch correction, and you can find Logic's pitch correction right underneath the pitch section of the drop-down menu. So we're going to go ahead and put this on. Right away you can see that there's a couple of different options. You have scale, so if you know what scale the song is in, then you can obviously put that in and it saves you a little time. But if you don't know what scale the song is in, you can just listen through it a couple of times and figure out what notes are being consistently hit. Then you should be able to pick them individually from the keyboard. So for this tutorial, I just figured out what the notes were and I just picked them and put them in on the keyboard manually. So the next thing you're going to need to know about is the response control, and this is basically just going to determine how fast the auto-tune enacts as soon as the vocal hits in the song. So right here I have it set to 26. You can kind of listen to whatever vocal that you have when you're doing this in your own song and see how much of it you need for taste. It's pretty much just opinion and how much you want it to sound like on auto-tune versus a real performance. But for the Post Malone stuff, I like to keep a little bit of the real performance in there. So there we go. I got it kind of, you can hear it. You can hear that it's auto-tuning, which is what Post Malone does, but it's not too heavy. All right, we're going to move on. The next thing is going to be an EQ. So you can find that from the EQ drop-down menu. I just use the channel EQ. So we're going to explain a little bit about the controls for people who are less familiar. You got your volume right here in the side, and then your bands up top. So you can decide how much you want to increase or decrease the volume of specific frequencies. For this vocal chain, we're going to rely on the notch EQ technique. So you can see after we put this EQ on, it's going to really reduce certain harsh frequencies that we can actually see in the analyzer that are going to be a little bit more harsh. You can see right around 220 here. This frequency is really excited, and alongside this one around 485 and 970. All of these seem really, really excited. And too much of those frequencies inside of the vocal track can basically be aggravating to the listener. So this is going to be different for every vocal because everyone's voice is different. So what you're going to need to do is move up the band to increase the volume of the frequency and then see if it's aggravating to your ear. And if the frequency is aggravating to your ear, then you're going to want to take a little bit of it out. And these compounding notches that you create with your EQ allow for a smoother and more evenly balanced vocal overall. You're going to want to take a little bit out of the low end with a high pass filter at the bottom here. And the reason we do that is because there really isn't any information in that area anyways that's going to be useful to the song or hearing the vocal. And it might actually cause the mix to become a little bit muddy if there's rumble from a mic stand. So remember, this isn't an exact science. You're always going to have to scan around for different frequencies based on whatever voice you're EQing. So really don't necessarily go off the ones that I picked. Kind of go off the ones that sound harsh to your voice. All right, so our next step is going to be compression. You can find that under the dynamics section. There's a bunch of different types of compressors that the Logic compressor has inside of it. So for this one, we're going to choose the Studio FET because it's going to add a little bit of a color. It's going to be the first compressor on our chain. So this is another thing that's going to be like the notch EQ, where you're going to kind of have to feel out what level you recorded your vocal at, how hot your preamp was, because that's going to kind of determine the threshold and ratio. But the main thing we're looking for in this first compressor is just to add a little bit of color and to get the vocal popping out a little bit more. We're going to really smash it down later with the second one. So we're going to take a look at exactly how much compression this first one's applying, and it's not going to be too much because, like I said, it's just going to be for the color. So as you can see here, there shouldn't really be that many decibels of gain reduction happening at any given moment. On average, you should be going anywhere from none to 3 and 5 at the most on this compressor. That should give you a little bit of the color from the FET, which is kind of nice. Next, we're going to smash the vocal here with the Platinum Digital compressor. I like this one to really get the vocals evened out because it doesn't really have any coloring at all. So it can really make an even sounding vocal without adding any extra color to the frequency spectrum. So for this one, we're going to try to set up the attack and release, a really fast attack and a slow release, and that's going to create an evened out effect on the vocal. Now, of course, you have to remember that this is going to vary based on every single different vocal performance you're going to get. Some are going to be more dynamic, so you're going to have to compress it even a little bit more heavy-handed. So now that we've compressed the vocal pretty heavily and we can hear all of the syllables and all of the words that our vocalist is saying, we're going to go ahead and add some multi-pression. You can find this from the dynamics drop-down menu as well. So now this is a very complicated tool that we could do really a whole video on in general, but basically the concept of a multipressor is that it's an EQ and a compressor combined into one because you can compress different areas of the frequency spectrum. And you can play around with a lot of these controls and you can determine exactly what areas of the frequency spectrum that you want. But for the sake of simplicity for this video, we're just going to leave it on the user default settings that Logic gives you. The only thing that I've changed is the threshold for each of the bands of the multipressor, and basically I focused on cutting out a little bit of the low end and the high end for sibilance, and I left a lot of the mid-range in there because these pop vocals tend to be very mid-range heavy. So the next thing that we're going to look at here is a bit crusher, which is a plugin that's going to give our vocal a little bit of a digital effect. It's basically going to lower the sample rate of the vocal itself, but it also has a mix control which allows you to mix in how much of that sound that you want. So you're going to want the downsampling on 4 times and the mix on only about 10%, because you only want a little bit of this effect in here. It's going to start sounding a little too digital. Alright, so after we've added that bit crusher for a little saturation, a little digital effect, we're going to go ahead and add some reverb. We're going to choose the Space Designer reverb from the reverb drop-down menu. Also make sure that when you do it, you don't do it in mono, you do it in stereo. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose the big plate reverb from the large spaces section of the presets menu. Make sure that the dry is up to 0 dB. The pre-delay is at 0 milliseconds, and that the wet return is on negative 20 dB. Alright, so now that we have all of that set up, we're going to go to the EQ menu. You can turn on and off the bands of the EQ on the reverb here. I have this set up to basically highlight the mid-range and cut out a lot of the low end so that the reverb isn't muddying up the mix. Also, you're going to want to take out a little bit of that high end for the sibilance. You don't want a lot of that on your reverb or it's going to sound really annoying. Alright, so to finish up this quick little vocal chain, we're going to go to the bus sends area, and you can use the drag down menus to send this track to a bus. That's different than the in-channel effects. It's going to send it to an aux so that we can mix in the original vocal send with one of the bus sends. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to choose is our direction mixer from the imaging section. This is basically just going to give the vocal a little bit of extra width in the mix, and you can mix this in from your aux fader. I like to have the spread on 2.0 because it really just widens everything up and it's actually not distracting at all in the mix. So if you
got my APO inside, go little mama bad.
You can tell that it's really in mono.
Like Michael, can really trust
And that just kind of gives it a little bit of depth and width to the vocal itself. And that really just kind of takes a little bit of the stress off of the center of your stereo image. Also make sure the direction is at 0 degrees when you do that effect. All right, so the next thing we're going to move on to is a little bit of delay. So the way that I set up my delays is I set them up on 2 separate bus ends, and then I pan them left and right, and then I basically just stagger the delay slightly. So this first one that I have set up on my first aux is at 1/8. It's at feedback 64%, wet 100%, and dry at 0%. Those are the really important things to maintain. So also when you do this, you're going to want to make sure that your aux returns are very, very low in the mix. You're not going to want a ton of delay or it's going to start to get distracting in your vocal. And you don't want the delay to basically mess up the enunciation of the words. So yeah, keep it down. I keep it about negative 27 on both bus ends for this. So yeah, they're both going to have the echo from the drop-down menu. And basically, you'll stagger it a little bit. So instead of having it the same 1/8 on both, you'll have it a little bit longer on the second one so that it creates kind of a movement between the left and right areas of your stereo image. So now let's kind of regroup and hear how the chains sound so far because we're almost done.
And got my APO inside, go little mama bad like Mike.
Yeah, we got it really sounding really nice. So what we're going to do is we're going to add one more bus end, and this is just basically going to be for another last kick to the mid-range here. Because if we create a bus end that has an EQ, again, we can kind of just bring in as much of that mid-range as we want. But I also am going to bit crush this one pretty heavy because I really want it to be a saturated mid-range. And that's going to kind of add that last minute digital effect and that sort of 2018 kind of melodic rap effect when you have a little bit of that saturation in the mid-range. It really just kicks out and it sticks out of any instrumental that you're going to be putting this over pretty easily, honestly. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have a portfolio on Spotify of all of our stuff. If you want to hear it, you can check that out. Make sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe and leave a comment below for what video you'd like to see, any topics that you'd like covered, and any questions that you have. Thanks so much. It's been a good one.